So that really helped, but still frustrating and aggravating, especially when your business right now is primarily online. So, hi Judy, I was just talking about you, kind of sorta about your order. I knew I shorted her order. I knew it. As soon as I did it, I messaged her. Anyway, we'll get it taken care of. So, hi Margarita. Anyway, so it's 7:07. I'm just going to give maybe a minute or two more. Just before I popped on, I saw that one of my very dear friends from high school passed away. She's been battling cancer for most of the year, and unfortunately did not want to get vaccinated and got COVID, and unfortunately she passed away this morning. So I literally, like right before it went live, that message popped up in my instant messenger. I'm like, oh my gosh. So just so sad, so sad. Anyway, all right, it's 7:08. I hope you guys had a great weekend, like I said, and now that you can hear me, super excited about this month. Again, kind of rustic, have been playing with backgrounds, and I'll read that later. Sue, thank you so much for messaging me. But playing with some rustic backgrounds, some wood grains, some patinas, things like that. And I am a person that loves to give credit where credit's due. So when we did our lesson last week, and I was telling you guys about even the wood grain, where like that deckled edge that, we did, or I shared and showed you. Chris Hoy is so known for that. That was the first person I ever saw do that. Tracy Moreau does it a lot on her projects. She always credits Chris Hoy, that with the first person that she saw do it. So I just want to say, I'm not going to say too much, but I've had a couple of days of frustration. If somebody sees something and they do it based on inspiration from what you do and give no credit, it really kind of is a slap in the face. So if you get inspiration from somewhere, just kind of always maybe make a note of it. I was inspired by this. I saw this here, and I decided to do a background that looked similar. It just is, it's courteous and it's professional. So I'll leave it at that, all right, with y'all, my tribe. So, is anyone else getting frequent interruptions? Yvonne, I have seen it pop up once that there's a delay or that it was interrupted. Unfortunately, I have seen from many of my artist friends online and doing things online that there are a lot of interruptions right now with Facebook. And I do think it's the vast number of people that are trying to do business online. So come back and watch the replay if you don't get to see it all through, or if it continues to interrupt for you. If for whatever reason we get cut off, I'm going to keep going because this is recording on my system and I will post it to the group. Actually, it will post to the group regardless, okay? So, sorry about that. Sorry. Anywho's, so, Marianne, if you're still on, that probably reminded you when I was in Taiwan and I kept saying anywho's like 10 times, and that was annoying. All right, you guys ready to paint? So my rant's over. Just, if you're inspired by something and you love something and you see it and you do it, just give credit where credit's due. So that's all I'm going to say on that. But I love our backgrounds. I love the lesson from last week. I loved all the different backgrounds that I've done, and I have some others that I haven't even shared with you guys that are going to be lessons. But I did want to share one thing that I kind of played with yesterday on my downtime and playing. I'm just going to turn my camera down here. Was our August challenge. I had been playing around with one of our August challenge line drawings that I had put together. And was playing around with this. And again, like I said, credit where credit's due. I used that Japanese ink Signo pen. Before, I would use the Identa pen, which is fine, the fine tip. But it's too thick, And I have found that I can't get a really nice thin line on paint sometimes with it. So anyway, I've been playing around with this. Might be a lesson. If it is a lesson or a pattern packet, of course, you guys know that I will do the pattern packet in the group for you guys for free. So I'm going to move that over to the side. Alrighty. Alrighty. Yeah, never annoying. The fly in my house is annoying. Oh, goodness gracious. The gnats in Georgia are annoying, right? Okay, so I did put on the post this morning that, again, I was going to base coat my flowers in white, and I was going to do my stem and little pods plantation pine, all right? So, you got those pens from Tracy Moreau. I have the pens. I sell them on my website. I have them in black, white, and red, and I have them as a bundle. So you can get the black, white, and red as a set for $14, which is cheaper than if you bought them all separately. Okay. Anywho's, so base coated white, base coated plantation pine, and we're going to go ahead and get started on the flowers and the green first, because I want to take care of everything behind so that we don't work so much on our flowers and then get our green into our flowers. All right. These are so simple. We're going to make them a little more difficult because we like to do that as painters, right? So go ahead on your palette and get out. I'm going to move this to the side, and we're going to get out some, and I did give you guys a list. If you saw, I missed the base coat part. Oh, Margarita, I'm so sorry. Did you base those leaves with Plantation Pine directly over the background, or did you use white first? I did, so let me answer this first question first. Margarita, sorry. When I did the post this morning about our time, I said that I was going to have the flowers in white, everything else in Plantation Pine. Okay, so if you start doing that now, hopefully you can get that done. Molly Ann's question was, did I base coat? I went ahead and I just base coated the petals in white and the plantation pine right over the background. I didn't put a white barrier in between. Okay, and you can even see some of that background showing through those leaves. Okay, and the hollyhocks, the hollyhocks have kind of a different shaped leaf. Is it exactly like this one? No, but it does have some rounded edges, and I just went with what I was looking at, the pictures that I was looking at. So anyway, 2 coats of white, and you can still see some of the background, which is going to help us with our flower, and 2 coats of plantation pine on the stem and on the leaves, and on these little baby pods up here. Little buds, really, is what they are. So I gave you the colors of what I used. Move that to the side. So on your palette, we want to get out some plantation pine. I'm doing it now, no problem. Good to hear, Margarita. You know, and if there are color substitutions, you guys, if you need a dark green instead of plantation pine, just use a dark green. You can use like a black forest. If you don't have citron green, you can use matcha green. You can use celery shoot. You can use, you know, any kind of a light green color, okay? This one has a little higher. This is citron. This is matcha. And that one is the new color this year, which is celery shoot, okay? You can see citron green just has a brighter yellow content to it versus the other 2. Celery shoot's a little more muted, has a little more white. I feel like Tracy Moreau. Any bright green that you have. If you have some of the old colors, one of my favorites is the Margarita. Yellow, or what is it? Moss green, I think, and then yellow green. Again, they're bright. They're really pretty. So, and if all else fails, a little plantation pine, bright yellow, touch of white. Okay, so I have Plantation Pine. I'm going to put out on my palette a little bit of Prussian Blue. And I will go ahead and tell you right now. Let me, oh, you're welcome, Molly Ann. Margarita, I'm doing it right now. So I'm not going to look at the comments too much while we're painting. I will go back and answer any question you might have, all right? But I don't want to take our lesson to a 3 or 4 hour lesson. Prussian Blue. Now, typically my dark green is Plantation Pine and Payne's Gray. But I wanted there to be a blue tone to these leaves. That's what I saw when I was looking at all the reference photos. So the Prussian Blue is going to give me that for those leaves and stem. And then I also want to go ahead and get out some citron green. I don't need a lot of that, like a pea size. I'm going to move that to the side. I also, did I tell you guys? If I didn't, I meant to. Let's see here. Citron green. Antique green. Love, love, love. One of my favorite colors. It's very olivey. And if you want to get more of an olive green color when you're highlighting and doing things, instead of using white, use light buttermilk. Okay? You can get a really pretty green. It's very olivey. Olivey? It's very olive. So, Plantation Pine, Prussian Blue, Citron Green, Antique Green. And we're going to go ahead and tackle our leaves, our pods, our stems, get that taken care of, and then move on to our flowers. Okay? So, let me get some paper towels here and some brushes. I'm just going to use probably like a number 8 flat. Okay, so I have a number 8 flat. I'm also going to get, let's see, like a number 6 or a number 4 flat, something a little bit smaller. So I have that one, which is a faux squirrel, which I love. I've been using that one a lot lately. That's a number 8. I don't know where all my number 4s went. I love a good number 4. So I'm going to use this faux squirrel for the smaller little areas. But what we want to do, again, we have, and we're going to work in this small area, then we're going to work down here. So let me zoom in so we can get right up there. Okay. So we have, again, Plantation Pine, Prussian Blue, Matcha, and, or no, excuse me, Citron Green and Antique Green. So let's take care of the stem first. I am going to go ahead and get out a little bit of white. Oops, hello. To that. And a little bit of light buttermilk, because we're going to use a little bit of that on the leaves when we get down below. So we might as well get it out now. Okay. So, coming up here, I'm going to put my picture there so I can remember what I did. So, on the stem first, we'll go ahead and pick up a little bit of Plantation Pine. Let's get that white right out of there. Plantation Pine. And I'm just going to use the corner of that brush to get that stem based in again. And then with that brush, look how little paint I have on there. There's not a lot of paint. If you feel like it's a lot, swipe it across your paper towel. I'm going to pick up on the corner little citron green and a little bit of light buttermilk. Just on that one corner. See how little bit. just going to swipe it down that stem. And sometimes I take my finger and swipe it. Let's zoom in just a little more. You guys tell me if that gets out of focus at all. Okay, so I'm just going to swipe down that corner that has the citron green, a little bit of light buttermilk on it. Substitute for antique green. I'll let Tracy put that in the comments, because there really is not a good substitute I have found for this color. Sometimes these colors, they're just so amazing. It's hard, but it does have a, I'm going to pull it to the side here so you can see. It has a nice yellowy, muted green to it. So if you do not have antique green, I'm going to have to think on that one, Norma Jean. If you're not painting with me right now, let me think about that and decide what I'm thinking. It's going to be more of a mix than it's going to be straight out of a bottle. All right? And I just brushed that on there. So Plantation Pine, and then just a little on that corner, I had that citron green, little touch of light buttermilk, kind of work that into that corner, swipe it across your paper towel if you have too much, and you're just going to highlight that stem a little and wipe it out. All right, now I'm going to switch to my number 4 because I'm feeling like that number 8 is going to be a little too big for these. So I'm going to come up here again and just get, like, maybe these top 3, I'm going to get wet with Plantation Pine. Just like that. Okay? And then I'm going to pick up some of that citron. Some of that citron green and a little touch of the light buttermilk. And I'm going to highlight this one, not so much because it goes right off the edge, but very light pressure. I'm just pulling that color on from the top, following the shape of that pod. Can you see that? Just very, very little. It's the hint of, the look of, the impression of. It's not very, very bright. Okay. Then again, back to the Plantation Pine. I'm just going to re-wet some of these. Wipe it off. Kiss just the chisel edge. I'm going to kiss that citron, little bit of light buttermilk, work that in, swipe it across my paper towel, and I'm going to highlight that little pod. Okay, again, use your finger if you need to. A little bit on this one. A little bit on that one. Okay, we're going to bring this up. We're going to brighten it up. But my first color, Plantation Pine, little citron green, little light buttermilk. Now I'm going to come and pick up a little bit, I wish my whole palette could be in here, a little bit of antique green, a touch of white. Work that in. And on that brighter side, which for me, the brighter side is going to be that right side, the right side, the right side. This one, that top side. This one is pretty dark because it's behind and even has a stem that goes over it. So, again, a little bit of that antique green, touch of white. See how much brighter that is? touch of antique green, touch of white. Very kind of sketchy because they're going to have lines over them. We're just kind of getting, let me hold this up so you can see it. See all the different colors behind those lines? We're going to come in with that white with our liner brush. So we just want to get that coloring in the background. Little antique green, little touch of white. A little bit of that color on all those pods. Using my finger to kind of soften that. And I'm going to put a little bit of that right on the stem. See how much brighter that is? Because that yellow content in the antique green is really going to bring up that nice highlight. Okay, so guys, let me know if you can still hear me and you can still see me. And the last comment I'm seeing is from about 8 minutes ago. So I want to make sure that you guys are all still good. Hard sometimes when I'm using my phone and my iPad because, of course, if a message comes through like one just did, I can't see it. Okay, so see how we're kind of getting that color. It's a little sketchy, which is totally fine. Now I'm going to take, hi Chris, I'm going to let that set up for just a second, give you guys a little bit of a second to catch up on that. All good, hear you. Thank you, Braun. I'm going to go ahead and get me some water. All right. That's my 7th one today, which is awesome. Watching intently. Well, that's good to know. All is good. Good. So I have to tell you guys, my parents, they live in Alabama, like I said, and they drove up to come get their hair cut, and they were up at 6, and we were sitting at breakfast, and I said, oh, I got up at 8. And they're like, what? And I was like, for, I don't know, a couple times this last week, I've slept like 8 straight hours, which has been amazing. So, okay. Now, let's come back to this, and I'm going to use an angle brush. And I didn't tell you, but you can get on your palette some Payne's Gray. Of course, if you have the media line, that's my favorite. I've put my order in, not sure when it's going to be ready or available, but I will let you guys know first when I get the media line in, because it's my favorite. So, what we want to do now is add a little bit of shading. So I'm going to take a small angle brush, probably like a 1/4 inch angle brush, pick up a little bit of that Payne's Gray, a little touch of Plantation Pine, just on the toe. Okay, so a little bit of Plantation Pine, a little bit of Payne's Gray, work that in on the toe only. I have a little bit of water in my brush, and I'm going to shade and float that color right along the base of these little pods, just to separate them a little bit more from the stem, like we have here, where it meets right at that stem, where that one meets that other pod. And if you're getting any kind of a halo or anything, you can take your medium, where's my camera here, that medium soft flat top, which I do have in stock, and just kind of soften that a little bit if you feel like you need it. I don't always feel like I need it. Sometimes I do. I'm going to pick up a little bit more Plantation Pine, Payne's Gray on the toe of that angle brush, right up underneath where that stem meets that pod, a little bit darker, where the flower and the stem meet. Now, if I want to come in, let me zoom in and show you. If you have a very straight line right here where that petal meets, take away some of that petal. Okay, you can take away some of that right there. Okay, and because we have so many Canadian members, and if you're putting in an order for stamps and stuff like that, Deb, do you have those flat top brushes in stock as well? Because I know that you, that's a brush that you use often. Not sure that Tracy has those. Okay, now see, we have a little stem for that pod. Not even worried about that right now. Okay, we're just kind of getting that shape in. So let's rinse that out, dry it off. I'm not using any kind of medium. I just have a little bit of water in my brush. So what I want to do now, and this one, I got very close compared to, I was just looking at my original. I have a little more space, and I tend to do that sometimes when I base coat in. Okay, oh, that's awesome. Great, Deb. So Deb does have some sets. So see how there's a little bit of space in between? So if you did not cover that up like I did, that's where your little stem is going to go for that one right there. I just got a little high with that one right there. Okay, now I want to highlight these a little bit more. I want them to be a little bit brighter. So I'm going to give you a second to kind of get those colors on and put in a little bit of shading. I'm going to dry this. To be 1,000% honest with you too, this is a project, start to finish, this page, I could see doing in like a 6-hour class at a convention. To be able to take the time to walk around and show you everything. The beauty of having it on video is that you can stop it, you can go back and watch it as many times as you want to. So that's one reason I'm not going to sit here and wait 15 minutes for you guys to get this little portion done, okay? Now, coming back to my antique green, let's load a little bit of that and some white. Load that up on the toe. I'm going to add a touch more white. I have a little moisture in there. It's going to be nice and bright and yellowy. I'm going to turn it because I do want to highlight these a little bit more. Oops, too much. I tend to swipe my brush on my paper towel before I even start for that reason. But see what a little bit of using that finger will help do? I just want to highlight these a little bit brighter, a little bit more. Get a little bit more water in my brush. And highlight just the tops of those pods again. Not this one right here because of course it goes right off the edge. I don't want to bring too much attention to that one. But again, put a little bit of that highlight on. Mush it around with your finger. This one, again, because it's behind, the majority of what you see is dark, but I'm going to add a little bit of highlight. I'm going to turn it here. I'm going to add a little bit of a highlight on that edge right there. Well, hello. Need paint on your brush, Sandy. A little bit of a highlight there. Swipe it with your finger. And let's turn that around. Okay. Now, if you have a straight line, you want to avoid straight lines. So if you've got any kind of, and this isn't real straight, but I would like to mess it up a little more. I'm just going to take that brush, kind of mush that around. Now I do have a straight line. Hello. Took it from no straight line to a straight line. And then I'm going to take that same brush and just highlight that stem just a little bit more. Oh, I love that color. Such a great color. And again, you're just going to adjust. If you feel like it needs a little more highlight, add a little bit more highlight. Okay? Now, what I don't like is, even though this one goes off the edge, I still feel like it needs a kiss. It needs just a touch of that color. So I will bring a little bit on, not much, but I'll bring a little bit on so that it looks similar to that one. Okay? So I may have to catch the replay, had to get something else wired down. Oh my goodness, Judy, I hope you guys are safe down there. It looks like that storm is coming right up y'all's way. So I think I need to watch the replay. I'd love to be able to get better service. Totally understand, Christina. So sorry. But you know where it's going to be. It's going to be right here for you guys. Okay, so now let me dry this and find. So we were talking about the Signo pens. Again, like I showed you guys on that bee project that Tracy uses a lot with that black one to outline, to the red one. And I've always used like a black, a red, a blue when I've transferred patterns, especially for conventions. And I use a pattern like 10 times and I just flip back and forth between the colors. The white pen, instead of using a liner brush, you can use a white pen. But I'm going to show you both because you might not have this. This is not permanent. It's going to, if you go over it with a brush, if you go over it with water, what's wrong with my finger there? It's going to wash away. Okay? So let me show you first with the liner brush. I'm going to get my brush wet, and I don't want this to be stark white. So I'm going to get a liner brush. I know you are, Judy. Lots of prayers. Just hope that you guys are safe and that you don't have any damage at all. Just keep us posted, okay? I caught up with something else. Going to stay for a bit and then catch the replay. Glad you're here, Faye. Okay, guys. So a little bit of plantation pine, and I'm going to just kind of kiss the tip of that, the edge of that, with a little bit of light buttermilk. I don't want it too bright. Okay, and if I use just white, it's going to be too bright. So for this little guy right here, this pod has like a little tiny oval right there. And then the lines that kind of come down, almost, it reminded me of like a poppy pod. Okay. And again, I'm just going to kind of touch it to soften it. And that one's from the front. So I can only see the side of that. Again, just a little on this one since it's in the back. Think of parentheses. Think of kind of parentheses, a little bit straighter in the center. So see how those are kind of lining up. Very muted, toned down. Now, if you wanted to brighten it up, you can always come back in and add a little more, just a touch of plantation pine and light buttermilk, or a touch of white. I'm going to show you how to use the pen. So I do want to make sure this is dry. You don't want to use your pens on anything that's wet. And if you use the pens, you can use a matte spray to go over it, and it will seal it, or a workable fixative. Okay? So on this one, I'll show you, I can kind of touch it and do little sketchy lines. Just like that. Okay? See, just get a little bit of a highlight. But again, if you don't have the pens, liner brush, tiniest touch of white. And just kind of hit it here and there. If it's too bright, touch it with your finger. and tone it down. Now, let me tell you another trick too. If you do have the pens, if you think the white's a little too bright, you can take your liner brush and it's going to move with that water. And you can kind of tone it down a little. I found by accident and loved. Okay. And give it a little bit more of a floated look instead of just a line. So Carol, if you brush on a varnish, it is going to smear, definitely. I have sprayed it with a workable fixative and haven't had any problems at all. And then also the DecoArt matte medium. So down here we have a couple stems. So I'm just going to pull a little bit of Payne's Gray, and then this stem right here that goes over that pod. A little bit of Plantation Pine, a little bit of Payne's Gray, and get that stem on there. Wipe it off. Little antique green, little bit of light buttermilk on that liner brush, and just give it a little bit of a highlight. And if you can see that one, and I can't, but I'm still going to give it a little highlight. Antique green, a little bit of light buttermilk. To highlight those, okay, to put that in front. All right, jumping in late, just got back from the doctor, have a small on my lower end. Oh my goodness, Carol, so sorry to hear that. I hope that that is better soon. All right, let's zoom out just a little bit, and let's come down here. So let me zoom out even further so that you guys can see this page, okay? So we have our top portion. We've shaded right above that petal. We're going to come down here and tackle our leaves and this stem in a minute. I want to switch to our flowers. Remember, I told you guys if something's aggravating you or if you're ready to move on to something else, by all means move on to something else. These don't interfere with our flowers like that did, I felt, with that area right there. Okay, so let's move on. Let's come right back here. And I say that as I look at the clock and see it's 7:45. I don't want to have you guys here till 11. Although I'd love to paint with you till 11. Okay, so our flowers, we base coated them in with white. Now I'm going to hold this up and show you how many colors you see in those flowers. Hopefully you can see that on camera. I can. There's some green that got mixed in because I rubbed my finger. All those tiny little lines, Payne's Gray. Okay, so we are definitely going to tackle these, and then if I'm aggravated, frustrated, whatever, we're moving on to the leaves, and y'all just have to stay on the train with me. Okay, so with this one, I didn't mind that the background showed through a little bit, but I do want to go over it again, make those a little bit more white. You can see the difference. These are a little more white. Those aren't so. So my number 8 flat, let's get that. That one has a ton of green in it, so I'm going to pick up, and make sure wherever you pick up your white paint that you also are picking up clean white paint. Now when you pull these, if you pull it in the direction that the petal's going, it will help show you exactly where that petal is. Okay, the strokes, you're going to be able to see them. So no medium, no water, anything. I just have a brush that I rinsed, wiped off, and I have white paint on it. Okay, and I'm seeing that there's this very defined line of green. Not sure what that's from. So I'm just going to take care of that. And this is another thing. Let me hold this up real quick so I can show you. So like in the background, I obviously had some, like a paint chip or something. I don't care about that, to be honest with you. I think in the very old days of traditional toll painting, everything was sanded and smooth, and you didn't want to see the brush strokes, you didn't want to see the paint. I like texture, so that does not bother me. Things like this in my art journal, I don't worry about. If I'm painting it on a piece and I don't want that, of course I would take some sandpaper, and get that off. But in your art journal, just let those things ride, okay? It's not the end of the world. Alrighty. So now what I want to do is get my 3/8 angle brush out. Give you guys a little bit to get that on there. Get my paper towels from underneath my palette. Alright, so I'm going to take some Payne's Gray, and I do want to come in, actually, that's not touching and it's supposed to, right there. I'm going to take my 3/8 angle brush, and let's separate these petals just a little bit to help us. So on the toe only, I'm going to pick up a little bit of Payne's Gray, work that into the toe of the brush, work that in, kind of swipe it to the side. Again, sometimes if I feel like it's too much, I'll swipe it across the sponge or swipe it across my paper towel just to get a little bit of that color off. But I want to lay in some areas that I know I'm going to have a little bit of an automatic shadow. So here, and then again, if you need to soften that, which I'm not too worried about because we're going to have lines going through. I do have a little bit of a flip here. And then that petal goes there. Okay, so that little flip right there is for this petal. And see, can you see the green on the petal already? Do you see what's on my finger? That's what happens, and I love that. All right, I leave it. I like it. So the problem with that is, especially when I go to write the instructions, I know I did not put green on my brush to put green in that area. But if it was on my finger and I wiped the area with my finger, it's going to get into that area. So that's just one of those, that right there is driving me crazy. That's just one of those things that happens and I don't even think about it because I'm painting and doing, and then when I see that tint of color, again, if you like it and it's not there because you don't have green on your finger, guess what? You can add green in that area. All right. So we have that one, this one. We do have a little bit of shading underneath this one. And I need to get a little bit more water. Feeling like my float is not going on so pretty. Okay. Now, as we know, white flowers aren't white. White flowers have a whole bunch of color in them. And then they have brighter spots of white. So don't get hung up on that okay, this is a white hollyhock, it has to be white. No, it doesn't. And that's why I threw in that pink. Because these hollyhocks, we had the prettiest hollyhocks in England when we lived in our 14th century coach house, along with these huge dinner, almost dinner plate size poppies. And the hollyhocks, they'd been there forever. And white with a little bit of pink with, a darker shade. There's so many different colors. And I remember I taught them in a class here locally, and someone said, that's kind of like a grandma flower. That's like an old flower. I'm like, what are you talking about? And they're like, well, that's just a flower like my grandma had in her garden. And I'm like, well, I just came from England, and they were in my 14th century garden, and I love them. So anyway. All right. So a little bit more on that toe, and we're going to put just a little bit underneath here. And again, I'm not too worried about how perfect these floats are right now. Like I said, we're going to have lines running through these. So I will come right up underneath the petal here and shade between those two flowers there. Here's a Lana Lamb trick. Let me show you. Take a clean brush. Put a drop of water on your palette. I think one of the very first things when I was editor at Interactive Artist Magazine, and I used to do tips from the artists, and that was one of the first tips that was shared, and I thought, that is brilliant, because you can come right here and get just a tiny dot, come back to your place, and work that in. Okay, so I do want to separate those two flowers there, and then I also know that I have a little bit of a flip, and you will be able to see from your picture that there's a flip that goes right here. Okay, see how that just made that flip? Now, is it exactly like my line drawing? Probably not, and that's okay. Okay, so little bit more, work that in. I think they were a romantic flower. I totally agree, Maddie. I think they're just such a pretty, ruffly, dainty, but hardy, because they have such hardy stems. All right, so right up underneath where this flower meets this flower. And this came up, I can't remember where I saw it, but I answered a question on a live. You know, that if you pull that, see how you get that straight line right there with that color? Let me zoom in so that you can see what I'm talking about. You probably already see it. See that little, you don't want that. So I'm just going to take another brush, get it wet, wipe that away. But instead of holding your brush flat and pulling it, hold it at an angle, because your color's still going to float right off that brush, but it's going to be at an angle instead of flat. So we want to put all that right up underneath that petal right there. I've got fuzz from somewhere. Not sure where that's coming. Oh, you know where it's from? It's from my paper towel. It's a fuzzy paper towel. So let's get rid of that fuzz first. Okay. I'm just going to soften that out. And then same thing for this flower down here. We just have a few little places we want to separate with Payne's Gray. Nice and thin. We will get that in. Let's see, there's one right here. And a lot of times, again, starting at that center, since you know there's going to be color, just kind of pull that out. Got a little bit under here. Then, let's see, we've got a little under here. And because it's thin enough, you can start that right off that flower, right on that background. I am getting such a line. Ugh. Like I said, when I posted in the group Saturday that I was having such a bad day painting. Like, it was ugly. If I had shared it with you guys, you would have been like, why am I in this group? It was really bad. In fact, my husband walked in, and he's so funny because he's so honest, and he goes, well, that took a turn. And I said, right? Like a bad turn. So, yeah. Sometimes you just got to clean it up, wait for the next day. All right, what else do we have? We have a little bit of a, I have a little bit of a flip right here. And then just a tiny little line right there. Okay. So that's a really, really really strong line right there, isn't it? There, see, kind of get rid of it. All right, let me zoom out just a tad, just a bit. Come on. Okay, now this does have a little bit right here that comes down, just a touch. Okay, so that's multiple petals there. All right, now let's come in. I am going to pick up a little more water on my brush. Come back and load the toe of that with Payne's Gray, very thin. Can you see my palette here? It's very thin. And I don't care if it gets on the whole brush, but I want it, see that nice dark runway? I want this to be nice and thin. Because what I'm going to do now is I'm going to ice skate on the tippy tips of this angle brush. So you don't want it split. Mine's starting to split, so I needed to flatten that out. Nice chisel edge. And we're going to pull these lines in the direction of that petal. So I'm going to, from the top down, very, very lightly. And let me see if I can show you on something white so that you can see this. Here's that Stampendous wood grain stamp that I have. I'm not touching my brush and pulling. I am feather light swiping that brush. Okay, so I'm not setting it down and pulling. It's a feather, like a tickle on the tippy tips of those bristles, so that you get a nice thin line. Where it's darker, I'm going to show you how to take care of that, okay, especially in areas where I got too dark. Now, when you start, instead of starting on the left and working your way around, sometimes that gives you pinwheel action. You'll find that your lines start to go a little bit wonky. Start in the center. So just kind of start in the center and work your way to the right. Make sure you've got a little bit more paint on there. Come back over here. And you can work your way to the center. Okay? Now, that's when you start cleaning your stencils. Yes. So, see, I love this because it's soft and it's subtle and it's not so in your face. Little too dark. So, what I'm going to do is rinse my brush. Pick up a little bit of white. Work that in. Just like I did with the Payne's Gray. Okay? And typically I'd wait till I was done with all of it, but this is a good opportunity for me to show and share how you can fix that if you get it. Okay, a little bit of white, and again, you're just, and don't go between, that's going to take you forever. Start at the top, swipe down, and see how that tones it down with a little bit of that white. Okay, right there I still have a little bit too much of that shading. I'm not too bothered by it. In fact, what I would do there, which I have on my original, is maybe even bring a little bit of that shading up into the edge of that petal. Instead. Okay? Okay, so let me rinse my brush since I had white on it. Pick up a little bit more of the Payne's Gray. I have more water than paint. And again, this is definitely where you're going to want to walk this brush out. Doesn't matter if it gets on the whole brush, but as you start here, walk it out, because what it's doing is taking that water and that paint and it's thinning it even more. Still too dark? Add a touch more water. Okay. Now, when you pull these, you want to pull it in the direction of these petals. And again, that's what helps by starting in the center. I know that this is going to swoop just a little bit this way. So I'm going to swoop it in the center, swoop it, and swoop it. Okay? So very much like my anemone painting lesson that I did on my Sandy McTeer Designs page, if you saw that. It's pretty much exactly the same way I did it. Okay, oops, start in the center, because I know I want it to swoop. Much easier to follow those lines. Okay, and then again, let's come down here. I'm going to flip it over. Start in the center. Oop, a little too dark. Need more water. Way too dark. Swoop it a little this way. Swoop it that way. Okay. Now, isn't it already starting to look like this? Those lines. Can you use a rake brush? Absolutely. You could definitely use a rake brush. However, with a rake brush, I have found, Margarita, that's a great question, that unless you have your paint really thin, a lot of times we tend to put too much pressure and you get to the flat belly of that rake brush. The angle brush for me, I find if it's got a nice angle on it and a nice chisel, I can get a nice thin line just like that. And again, see how I'm just moving that in my hand? Nice and quick and loose and light is going to give you, to me, for me, a much better line than if I use a rake brush. Very, very much like we did on the peacock, where we used the angle brush to kind of pull those on. So forgot my little shadow here, so I'm going to slide that on. Okay, and then again, nice thin little lines. Start here, start in the center. And it's such a thin paint that if I go off, that's a little too dark, so I'm going to add more water, that if I go off the edge, like here, you're not going to be able to see it. Okay, it's so thin, it's just going to go right into that background. So I love these backgrounds so much. To be honest with you, I've been thinking about my Sunday Live on my Sandy McTeer Designs page. Just might be one or two and a couple other backgrounds like these. So I will let you guys know first. They won't get this lesson. It won't be the hollyhocks, and it won't be our lanterns, which I love. But some backgrounds maybe. Okay, so see how that's starting to take shape? Now, it also reminds me, especially this one, of like a ginkgo leaf. So if you have a leaf that has, you know, all those veins and lines that run through it, you can do pretty much the same thing. Now, these are looking very gray. We're going to bring some more white back into them. All right. Now, I do have, on this one, I do have a little bit of shading at the top there. Okay, so see how I did a little bit of shading here, just to give it a little bit of a ridge. And then again, I want to kind of start in that center, follow the shape of that petal. And I really need to beef this shading up right here. Yep. same thing here. Start in the center. And that, if you start with one line first, you already know if it's too dark or not. If it's too dark, you can kind of add more water to your brush and start. But don't keep going if it's too dark. Add a little more water, thin it out. Follow the shape of that petal. Okay, and nice, but then here I kind of lost color. Bye, Linda. Continued prayers for your hubby. I know it's difficult. You can't see him. Okay, so a little more water. Payne's gray. Start in the center. Hold those lines. And again, see how fast my hands move in? I'm just gliding and sliding on the chisel edge of that brush. Very, very light touch. Not pushing. Pushing's going to give me too much pressure. Okay. Now, I'm going to rinse that brush out. And I'm going to look and see if there's anywhere I need to add. I know here I have a little bit of a, let's come to my finished one. I have a little bit more of a ridge. You can do this now, you can do it later. I like to kind of know exactly where they're at. So again, I'll just bring a little bit of that shading in. Kind of automatically put in a little bit of that ridge. Rinse my brush. Water in my brush. I'm going to pick up some white. Come over here. Pick up some white on the toe of that brush and just work it in. I can have a little bit more white than I did the Payne's gray. Okay, work it in both sides. And anywhere you want to brighten it up just a little. Remember, we have to have some gray for our white flower to look white. But anywhere you feel like maybe it got a little too much or you want to brighten it up, you're just going to slide in some of those strokes. Now these will show up a little on the edge, so if so, just push it back into the petal. Okay, a little bit more white. Following the shape. And again, I don't really need to start in the center because I already know the shape. That Payne's gray is telling me what the shape is that we put on. So I can start here and know that that swoops. Turn that over. Quick. Don't think about it. You'll want to make it more difficult than it is. Just kind of slide it on. I'm going to rinse my brush, or not rinse it, excuse me, just get a little bit more white and a little bit more water so that it moves. Goes outside the edge, just kind of turn it. And you do want to make sure you turn your piece so that your lines are going the direction. Mine started to go this way. That's a good place right there too. See where that line's just a little dark. I can come in and kind of break it up just a little with a little more white. Okay, now let me hold this up. See how much more white those are than they were? Especially that one. This one's still a little bit on the dark side for me. I'm going to leave it for now. Pick up a little bit more water. Touch more white. And let's take care of this little half flower. Okay, again, slide on the chisel edge. I wish you could feel that like on your hand. It's a tickle. In fact, do that if you're doing this right now with me or when you're watching and the replay and painting it. If it tickles the palm of your hand, you're doing it exactly right. Do you see right there that you can get some pretty cool fur? It's very, very light and layered, all right? So just a tickle. And I'm very ticklish. I don't know about y'all, and I don't like to be tickled. Okay, so some brighter white lines. I have to tell y'all, it was the sweetest thing though, because our youngest son, today's his 25th birthday, and he FaceTimed us about an hour before our class tonight, and he had like bread or something, and I'm like, are you eating a hot dog? I hate hot dogs. I like a corn dog smothered in mustard, but just to eat a hot dog, don't like it. So he said, no, I made some pork loin and I'm having it on a bun. So he's just like my husband. So whereas I would stop and get something to eat on the way home because I didn't want to make something, he has his week planned out and what he's going to cook. So he knew he was going to have pork loin on his birthday. That's something I used to make all the time for him. Okay. So anyway, look how pretty those are starting to come together. I mean, they kind of look like a little bit of a mess, but still pretty. So what I want to do now is I'm going to take a little more white on the toe of that brush. And I don't want to do it everywhere, but like on this little flip, I can brighten up that white, right? I can brighten up the white here. You can use a liner brush if you want to. Brighten up the white.
Something in the neck of that
right there.
Goes up and down. It's sticky and causing it to jump up.
Okay. And then I'll show you the liner brush and the pen, how to kind of brighten those up as well. Now let's take care of the center. So, as you're finishing that up, hopefully with your little lines, if you're painting along, I know it's going a little on the fast pace, but we have our greens out for our centers. Now, let's talk about the centers for a second. On hollyhocks, there's like this little starburst in the center. Let me get here so you can see. That's kind of a lighter green and almost like a hibiscus where that stamen kind of goes down into it. You have this little starburst of color. It's not the same on every single one of them, okay? On the one that I was looking at that was white that had a touch of pink to it, it had this green, really pretty green to it. So this is going to take a little bit of back and forth and working, and then our little stamen that's furry and fuzzy. But do you see how not exact the little starburst is like on here? It's the hint of, the look of, the impression of. Okay? So, saw 3 huge hollyhock bushes today in our morning walk. Aw, thanks, Lana. I loved this painting when I was doing it, and when I finished it. It just, I don't know, it just made me smile. So, okay, we do want to make sure this is a little on the dry side. I'm going to take my number 4, go back to my number 4, rinse that out. And we're going to put in our stamen first, okay? So, you want to know direction. That makes all the difference in the world. So, this one, my stamen's kind of going to the left. This one, same. And I got red paint on there from when we did our class the other night. And, you know, that one's going out to the right. So let's start with some Payne's Gray and Plantation Pine, and I'm just picking it up on my number 4 brush. Plantation Pine, Payne's Gray, and I'm just going to start in the middle and kind of however long you want it. And these are kind of short and stubby. They're not like a stamen on a calla lily that's quite long, or even a hibiscus for that matter. So I know that it's going to go to about there, and I'm just going to tap that in place to get my basic shape. Okay, Payne's Gray, Plantation Pine, kind of get that basic shape in. Same thing over here. Now this one comes out just a touch to about there, and that goes almost straight toward that right edge, and I'm just tapping on the corner. Nothing exact, nothing pretty. We've got to get to that ugly stage before we get to the pretty stage. Okay, and then I know down here, again, starting in that center, and I don't want to start down here. Like if your shading comes to here and your center is going to be down here, I can see that already, that if I start down here where my shading comes together, my center's not going to be in the center. So I'm going to bring that up to here. So before you put that in, make sure that that's actually in the center of your flower. And then I just kind of round out that edge on the bottom, although that will be taken care of. Okay, so we have some placement. That's going to help us with everything else in the center of that flower. All right, again, Plantation Pine, a little bit of Payne's Gray. Now, I used, I put on y'all's supply list my favorite, which is the quinacridone magenta in the media line. Cannot wait to get the media line. If you do not have this, Berry Cobbler is a close, alizarin crimson with a touch of like royal fuchsia would give you a pretty color. Oh, I just saw that paused. Okay, so a little bit of quinacridone magenta is what I'm going to use. But again, if you've got a color that's similar, by all means use it. Now I'm going to go back to my 3/8 angle. Pick up just a touch. In fact, let me show you here. I have enough on here for us and then some. All of us. You need just a little bit of paint, especially if you're using the media, because it's very, very highly pigmented. Now, what I want to do is I'm going to slide from here in the center out. I'm going to slide some lines. And don't worry about the edges of those petals. Just keep going. Okay? So, you can beef it up here and there if you want to. If you want to make it a little bit darker. But not too dark. And they don't come out too far. And again, I'm going to turn that so that I do have some right above that stamen. So it doesn't just look like it stops. So we have some of that pink color there in the center. I need to get a little bit more on this guy right here. Again, don't be afraid to use those fingers. Thank you, Maddie. Yeah, these are things that when I first started painting, I don't know about y'all, but when I first started painting, I would look at something the first thing you see is the stamen in the green, but you have to get what's underneath it first. So I love, it's one of my favorite things in painting is kind of that challenge of, okay, how do I get that on there before the other thing? I don't know, it just excites me. Like the little pods we did above, where you've got to get that color in first and then layer on top. Okay. So again, little bit of that quinacridone magenta. And again, if you want to beef it up here and there, which I did in a couple places, especially on this one here, I do have a couple of richer, darker green spots, magenta spots here and there. But what makes it stand out even more, and I'll hold it up in a minute, so I'll give you guys whiplash, is some dark. So as I'm doing this, I'm thinking, it just needs to be anchored. It needs that that rich, dark something to make it look like I could stick my finger in the center, or that stamen is in the center of that flower. And it's those little touches right here, that little touch of Payne's gray or a little black that's going to give that center that depth. Okay, and let me hold this up real close, because look how not pretty. Up close, that's not real pretty, right? You've got a little green, you have a little pink, you have a little, so don't get so hung up that it has to be precise and exact, or this has to make a perfect V. It looks like a V in the end. Okay? And look how dark those lines are close to that camera. But then when I pull it away, you know, it's a white flower. All right. So let's rinse that out. I am going to come back with my number 4 flat, and I'm going to pick up a little bit of antique green on my brush. So a little bit of antique green, just a little, and I kind of want to give myself some placement. So I know, and this stamen actually looks like it's going up a little compared to my original, but I'm just going to go with it. So I'm going to go from the center out, and I'm just going to pull some lines. So flat, and I'm going to pull to a point. Flat, and I'm going to pull to a point. Flat, pull to a point. Antique green, just a little. Because if I wanted to wipe that off, I could take a baby wipe and wipe it off. If I put too much paint, it's going to be a lot harder to wipe off. Touch and pull. Antique green, just a little, is our base for our little starburst of green. So we're going to pull one from here. Little one from there. And I will tell you guys too, like I tell you all the time, this stop, hold it up, push it back, look at it, and see if you need to adjust anything. Sometimes we want to fix it because we're right here and we see what looks wrong, might not be wrong. All right? Hold it at arm's length away from you and evaluate it before you try and fix something that maybe doesn't need to be fixed. See, even that, sometimes that'll bring some green onto my petal, just using my finger. Flat, pull it to a little bit of a point. Okay. So, just going to kind of touch those with the palm of my hand. Flowers are perfect in their imperfection. Right, Carol? Totally agree. And again, I know I say it all the time, but it really is another thing I love about creating in my art journal is I can play around with my coloring and shape and everything here. But then to take this, like you guys saw on the peacock, to take that to another surface, which many of you did, you can adjust. You can be like, oh, I want this to be a little bit more metallic. I want to add a little bit more of that detail here. And I'm just looking at this one, and I want to add a little more antique green. So I'm just going to pop that in there. So you can adjust. This is where you get to play. Okay? Now, I'm going to rinse that out, just kind of give that a little touch test. Come back with my number 4, and this time I'm going to pick up some citron. I do want a little bit of water in my brush. Pick up a little bit of citron green. Work that in. Tiny touch of white. Swipe it across my paper towel. And I'm just going to swipe it right over that. Swipe it with my finger if I need to. Okay, now this might take a couple passes. You might need to put it on. Oop, too much white. You might put it on and go, ooh, I want a little bit more of that, green, that brighter green. Put it on. Go to your next flower. Swipe, swipe. Citron, a little bit of white. Slightly mix. Tap it across your paper towel. Swipe it on top of the antique green. Nothing too heavy. The white's going to make it a little opaque because citron green's totally transparent. And we want to be able to see that base of antique green with the brightness of that citron green. Okay, so now I'm going to come back and pick up a little bit more. You can pull that right back on. Second little swipe of color. See how much brighter that is compared to that one with the second layer. And that's why there's no sense in doing that center pod, that center stamen at all until you get this part done. Okay, now I'm going to rinse that. Rinse it off and dry it off really, really, really well. And I'm going to come in with some black. I want to, I think I used Payne's Gray and it wasn't dark enough. So if you have a little bit of black, on that number 4, I'm going to pick up, let me get my palette up here. I want to pick up just a little bit of that black. Not a lot. Right in the corner. Going to touch and pull. See how that grounds that just a little bit? Just a little. Although that black's looking a little harsh. Ugh. It's gonna happen. It's gonna happen on live, right? Swipe that in. See how that grounds that just a little bit more? We don't want to do it everywhere, but if you're feeling like it looks like it's floating, you definitely need to put it in. Okay, so we have it there. I'm going to have it here. A little bit of black. If you feel like it's too harsh, you can use some Payne's Gray. that side of the stamen. And this is what I'm going to also suggest as you're doing these little tiny details. Look at the finished picture that I gave you guys on that PDF. And when you look at it, I want you to squint your eyes. Because when you squint, you see the darks and the lights much better than when you're just looking at the picture. So if you can look and see those darker areas in that center when we're doing this part of the lesson, if you're watching the replay or if you're going back and finishing, or if you're painting along with me now and you're like, I don't really care for mine right there. Go back and look, squint as you're painting it and looking at that picture to get that dark color in there. All right, let's rinse that out. I'm going to come to just a liner brush. Going to pick up some white, clean white. I'm going to just have it on. I'm using this is not a liner, it's a number 2 rigger. So just has a flat tip, but I can use it like a liner. And I want to take care of these little stamens in the center, but I don't want to cover up all the dark. Okay, so I want water in my brush, loading that up with some white, and I'm going to tap, 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 tap. And I want to go beyond where I put in that stamen, meaning I don't want to just stay right along that line. I want to go beyond just slightly, and then when it dries, we'll shade along the base and the bottom half of that, which is going to change the color and it's going to ground it, make it a little more dimensional. Okay, so white, dot, 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 dot. Not covering up all the base, meaning the base color that we painted it. Trying to keep that same shape. And let me show you a trick too. If you, like if your little triangle things come out too far and you're not real happy with those, come in with a little bit of that, either Payne's gray or a little bit of white, and you can just kind of slide that in, take away a little bit of that tip if you need to, or if you need to shape it up a little, like this one's flat, that's a really good one to show you. See how that just has a flat edge there? I could come back in with some green, or I can just come back in with my white and give it a little bit more of a triangle finish. Okay. So, and those, I still feel like those need to be bumped up a little bit, but I'm not going to take the time to do all of them because I do want to move on to our leaves. I love these leaves. But let me show you on this one so that you can see the difference. Again, how much brighter. Again, working in layers, building that color. It's so much easier to fix when you're not happy with something than slapping a whole bunch of color on your brush and trying to fix it. Okay. All right. So what we want to do now is I'm going to come in with my, I'm going to get some asphaltum. Just a touch. And an angle brush, so like a 1/4 inch angle, I think would be good. A little bit of asphaltum on the toe of that brush. I'm going to pick up a little antique green. Little asphaltum. Kind of work that in. I'm just going to slide it on that bottom side of that stamen. And I did come back with a final fuzzy layer on those stamens, okay? I wanted it to be, I don't know, I just wanted them to look like they were fuzzy. So, little antique green, a little bit of asphaltum on that toe, just sliding that along that base, and bottom side of those flower centers. Okay, now let me let this, I'm going to dry it. And then let me zoom in really close. Okay. So, I dried off my 1/4 inch angle. Get just the tiniest touch of water, some white. Come over here. Some white, and a tiny touch of light buttermilk, which mine has a film on because my lights are so bright. Okay. Now, just like we did when we were pulling the lines, start at the tip, just kind of lightly tap. And you can kind of turn it so you can get that toe, but I want to hold this up so you can see the difference with using that angle brush versus that liner brush. Okay? Such an underappreciated brush, I have to tell you. I love a good angle brush. White, tiniest touch of light buttermilk. I'm going to turn it because I know I want to start at the tip. Get that fuzzy edge, especially like along that edge that comes out. Okay. Thanks, guys. Hi, Denise. Hi, Heidi. Okay, let's come right up here. Again, little white, little, just a tiny touch of light buttermilk. You know, the cool thing, again, I find with painting is you can make it as realistic as you want, or if I want a photograph of hollyhocks, I'll take a photograph of hollyhocks. I'm painting hollyhocks. So it's my interpretation of what I'm seeing, and we all see something different. So when you're painting them, even looking at my finished picture, you might see something different than, you know, the next person painting it. So just go with it. Don't put too much pressure or stress on yourself. And like I always remind you guys, when you have time to work this in and paint it, then paint it, okay? So I'm digging those. I think they're pretty cool, don't y'all? Do they need a couple tweaks? Absolutely. But I can always come back and, you know, brighten up, shade up anything that I'm feeling like my pink in a couple places is a little on the light side. I probably would come back, especially for this one, and add in just from the base a little bit of that darker magenta. See how right there just really changed that whole flower, that whole petal, right in the center there. Very tight, okay? So you can come back and adjust as needed. But let's finish these flowers out with the liner brush. And again, if you have the white pen, you can use the white pen and come back and just do very loosely and lightly what look like ruffles. Okay, and do you notice how I went above and beyond and outside the lines of that flower petal? That's going to look so much prettier than you going and outlining the whole thing. Just kind of sketchy and bring it in. And sometimes it leaves a line, so I just pull it with my finger. It stays wet for a little bit, which is awesome. And if you don't like it, all you have to do is take a baby wipe and wipe it off. Okay? And if you don't want it to be a line, take the toe of your wet angle brush and you can give it a little bit of a bleed. There's nothing on my brush. Okay, because it's a Japanese ink, so it's going to move for you. And like in the background, I think I shared that with you guys last week, that if I wanted to come in and do a little bit sketchy with the pen, I could take my finger and soften that out, just to introduce just the subtle little touch of white. Okay, if I don't like it, lick my finger, brush it into the background. Okay, now again, if you don't have the pen, I have them in my store. But liner brush, inky, water, white, paint, and you're going to do the same thing. It's just very loose, very sketchy, and then you can brighten up and thicken up any of those areas that you have where you see a flip. Okay, so here I finished mine. My finished one is with the pen, so it's going to be a little bit on that thinner side. Okay, but I don't know about y'all, but I just think that's so sweet, so pretty, so cute. Again, your pen, don't want to use it over wet paint. And if you're not familiar with that, I'm sure most of you probably are. Uniball Signo, okay, white. You can get it in red, you can get it in black. For my international, for Yvonne and y'all in Australia, you might be able to find it on your Amazon or at your Walmart. You can come in and brighten up the white just on the tip and top part of that stamen. Okay, just like that. Okay, not too much. Do you have a preference, pen or brush? To be honest with you, Sue, I love the pen. You know why? Because just like when you sign your name with a liner brush, it feels weird. You're using a brush. Whereas if you can use a pen to sign your name, you have that control, you know, that you do when you're using a pen. So I feel like I can move the pen looser than using a brush. But if you don't have it, then definitely a brush is going to work. And I did see, I think Sharpie even has a gel now, a white gel. Not sure if it's permanent. That's the biggest thing is this is not a permanent. It will move with water. So you do have to spray it before you put a brush on varnish over it. But I love the look of it. I love the finish of it. Now, what I do need to do is on this flip right here, add one more little thing, and then we're going to move on to those leaves. Okay, I want to add a little shading at the base. So at the bottom of that flip, a little bit of Payne's Gray. Okay. Oops, let's get to the camera there. So I just added right at the base of that, just a little bit of Payne's Gray. Okay. Now, when you finish yours, if you're like, ooh, that pink's a little too bright, you can always come back. Tiny, tiny touch of Payne's Gray. And just do a little bit of a wash over it. So see how I'm just taking that angle brush and going right over it? if it's too in your face pink, that Payne's Gray is going to enrichen that pink color and take it down, just kind of like an asphaltum would. So see how much that already went down compared to the brightness of this one? I like it bright, but again, I also like it toned down. Okay? All right, let's move on to these leaves. Now, not sure that I'm going to do all three of them. Definitely we'll do as many as we can before it's too late. But they're done exactly the same way. Okay? Let's take care of our stem first because it's in the back and it is going to get covered up. So let me come to my number 8 flat and my number 4, just like we did above. And again, these hollyhocks, they have such sturdy, strong stems. I'm going to take my number 8, Plantation Pine. Let's just kind of get that wet. Come right up underneath. That's another great place that if it's straight there, mine isn't straight, but if it were straight, you could take the corner of that brush, notch out a little bit in that petal, to bring that plantation pine right down that stem. And then I will pick up a little bit of the citron green, a little touch of light buttermilk. Let me bring my palette over. Kind of mix that on your brush and swipe it across your paper towel. Remember, we're just going to almost dry brush. The plantation pine's still a little wet, so it's going to pick that color up. If I can put it on, swipe it with your finger. Little antique green, little white. It's got a brighter yellow content to it. Excuse me. It's dull, but when you add the white to it, you're going to get a nice, pretty olivey yellow color. Olivey is not a word, but I like the way it sounds. And then hit that. See how much you get right there from
Hi,
that
Jason. This is Joan
antique
Gross.
green, a little bit of white.
I'm doing well.
Swipe
Hopefully
it
you
down.
can help me.
Okay. Now, I have a really good shadow going on
a
right
couple
there,
days
just
ago,
from the
I was
plantation
buying one of
pine, but
those,
we do want to
dream
intensify
boxes.
that a little bit.
And I went on to the link
So I'm
to
gonna dry
finance, and
that.
it said my phone number was already in use and wouldn't let me go any further, and I've never done any business with you. So I would like to get the 12-month financing on that. It accidentally
come
went on
over
a credit
to
card, and she told me to call you to
I'm
find
just going
out
to use
what
a
the
quarter
issue was
since I have it
about
right
getting
here.
financing.
A little bit of Payne's Gray and Plantation Pine. So let's get on camera there.
Thank you.
Okay. So I'm going to come right up underneath the flower, and then I'm going to float that color down that right side
No, I'm Joan Gross.
of that stem. And behind that leaf. Okay? Now, the same thing we did with the pods above,
It just asked for a phone number. I put it in.
where we put that color on. I did the same thing with the leaves. I just kind of
517-7455.
slapped on colors
And it said
and
it was
pulled
already in
them.
use.
I
and
really
wouldn't
need
let
to
me go
zoom
any
out
further.
so that you guys can see this. Okay. See all the different colors on here? Started with the dark, and then I just swiped on colors toward that base of that leaf. My brush still has water on it. So I have citron green, I have antique green, I
No,
even have
it didn't give
some
me a-
peacock teal, which we've not
It was
used
ju-
yet,
that was
but
just
we are
whether
going
that's
to
when it
put out on
stopped,
our
and it just
palette.
told me that
So
my
all
number
that
was in
color
use,
comes
so-
on. We have the light, we have the dark. Love where you can see the variation
I've
in
had
here.
this number for 20 plus years.
So it's not, we're base coating, we're putting a light here, we're putting a dark here, typically like you do with the leaf, right?
Yes,
We're
Carl.
swiping a lot of these different colors on. Then when we pull our little veins
No,
in
he would have a different
and
number.
adjust maybe where we need to with a little shading, it all comes together. Okay, and I don't know about y'all, but I really do like these leaves. So, if you do, leave it in the comments because there hasn't been one for about 8 minutes. I'll make sure y'all are still with me.
Okay.
Okay,
Sure.
so I'm going to go to I'm going to use my number 8 flat. And I'm going to pick up. So follow along with me because it's going to go back and forth. Plantation Pine. I'm going to pick up some antique green on the same brush. Okay. And again, my stem is going to go right here. It will help if you kind of know where your center of your leaf is going, right? So I'm going to pull down from the edge of my leaf. I can already tell I need to pick up just a touch of water in my brush, just because it's dry in here.
Honey,
A little bit of plantation pine.
Name for any kind of financing, do you?
Antique green. I added a little bit of water so that it would move.
Or anything? They had your name and my phone number in there for the dream card, and that's why I threw on your mind. It said it's already in use, and you brought your name up with my phone number.
So, again, everything's based in plantation pine. I did 2 coats. If you feel like you need to do a third, you certainly could. But plantation pine, antique green, a little bit of water in my brush. And I'm going to pull from the edge down toward the base of that leaf. Just like that. Okay? I'm going to slightly wipe off my brush. Pick up a little touch. Let me show you my little touch. Little touch of light buttermilk. Work that into the brush. Swipe it across a paper towel. Start at the tip. Pull it down. Now y'all know I love to use my fingers. I can't tell you on my leaves where I used my fingers. I just know that I used my fingers. So see how that softens that? So again, that's little antique green, little touch of light buttermilk. Mix that on your palette. Swipe that down. Hit the wrong button. Was supposed to continue with can't type and watch. Oh, your leaves are very painterly. Your background in oils is showing. Oh yes, Molly Ann. I do love to paint in oils. And you know what? I think one of my favorite things to kind of mimic is the look of that with acrylics, because I'm not a traditional tool painter. I did not learn. I taught myself how to do a lot of what I know, and it's from looking at it. And I will find and share with you guys, probably not on my Facebook page, but I will share with you guys, and I might have already early on when I started my group, which is so hard to believe. It's almost been a year. One of the first things I painted for my mom, it is so bad. It's so bad. At the time, I thought it looked good. And it was my very early days when I was trying to learn how to do one-stroke painting. So anyway, it's bad. So again, I'm just playing. I'm playing with color. Started with that plantation pine, added some antique green, a little bit of light buttermilk, pulling it with the shape of that leaf, swiping it with my finger, wiping off the brush. I'm going to do the same thing now with some citron green, a little bit of light buttermilk. Slightly mix it. Now you see I'm not going to get too much down here with light. I want to keep this a little bit on the darker side. My brighter side's going to be this in the center. So you're kind of dry brushing. I don't have a lot of paint. Swiping it with your finger. It's going to look different every time you do it, from leaf to leaf. Now, when you're doing the three at the same time and you're doing that same color combination, you're going to get a very similar
Yes.
look. All right. Again, citron.
Absolutely.
Swipe that on. I'm beginning to use my fingers and saying y'all. Oh, I love it, Norma Jean. I love it. Okay, so what I can do now, if I'm finding that this is getting a little too bright, which I am, is rinse my brush, keep some water in it, come back with some Plantation Pine. And I can do a little bit of a wash right over that. Okay, so see how that just kind of tones it down? I don't know, I love that. I love playing with color. Okay, so I'm feeling like I need to swoop this in just a little bit more. So a little antique green. All the leaves are done exactly the same way. All right? Exactly the same way. This one, I would do it next, and then this one last. Okay, now let's dry this. My brush is pretty much dry, Carol, yes, and until I went over it with the Plantation Pine, with a wash of with that color, my brush was pretty dry. Now, is it bone dry? No. You know, it's been wet. I've rinsed it, but you can see there's no water coming off on my finger. And that's a good way to test how much moisture you have in your brush. But when I load it, when you load paint, which is wet, and then mix it, and then if I keep brushing it, what's going to happen is it's drying out that paint and those bristles, and you'll start to see them separate and everything. So I have just a little bit, but look how much still comes off my brush. Okay. All right, so now what I want to do, I am going to get out a little bit of peacock teal on my palette, because this color over that bright, oh, it's gorgeous. I'm going to pick up a little bit of peacock teal here, work that in, and again, my brush is dry. I'm just going to bring that over here, and then I want to swipe that on in a couple places. Sometimes I do it where I don't have enough paint. Got to come back, pick up a little bit more. Now, just because I'm putting the peacock teal on now doesn't mean that you can't come back and add the peacock teal where you want it. For instance, your stem. See how pretty that is over that light color that we have? Come up here, add a little bit on that, a little bit on those pods, right over that white. Just a little bit of that color. Okay. Now let's come right back down here. So I'm going to come in with my liner brush, rinse that out. I'm going to pick up some antique green, a little bit of light buttermilk, but I can already tell you right now it's going to be too bright for what I want. The tiniest touch, Plantation Pine. I have a lot of water on my liner brush there. Okay, so I'm going to flip this because I know I won't get it right. And if you're looking at something, so if you're looking at your finished picture, flip your finished picture too. Okay, so I'm going to flip that so that I can see it and bring that line right up. Get a little bit more moisture. It's a little on the dry side. just slide right out to those little humps right there.
Sure.
Okay. And then there is like a tiny little right there, right there. If anything
Why
gets
was there
too
an
bright,
application to
all you
begin
have to
with?
do is come back with some plantation pine and go right over it. Now, I need this to stand out a little bit more. So
He's never used it
angle
before.
brush.
He doesn't. He's never used it
Let's
before, and he
do-
doesn't know what it is.
Let's do a 3/8 angle. I'm going to pick up a little bit of plantation pine on the toe, tiny touch of asphaltum. Okay. Now, depending on what color your leaf is, if it doesn't show up, add a little touch of Payne's Gray.
Well, I'm just
And I say that
concerned
because
that
your
my
base coat
husband's
might have
name
been
and my
darker
phone
than
number.
mine.
He never uses my phone number on anything.
And
That
then
maybe there was a little
kinda
fraud or
slide that
something
right
going
up.
on here. So was that application ever approved?
on that vein.
Okay.
Again, use your finger. And if it goes
Okay,
over it
thank you.
slightly,
And so I'll just go
sometimes
through
it
the
doesn't
link that
bother
they
me at
give
all.
me, or
Well, I told him I would reach out to you and see.
Now let's flip that back over.
Because this is, I guess, something that,
Turn that back around.
okay. Thank you so
And
much.
again, you can come.
Hopefully this will work. We'll see.
On the side of that vein.
Okay. Thank you.
To get a little bit of that to show up a little bit more. Now, I am seeing that I want this to be brighter and lighter, and it needs a little bit more coloring. The other thing is, once I put those veins in, my lines going here are great. My lines going here are going the same way. See how they're going straight down? I want to bring those a little more towards the base of that leaf. And the base of a leaf is where the stem connects with that leaf. So those go too straight. I need to change that. So I'm going to come back to my number 8. Pick up a little bit of plantation pine, a little bit of antique green. I'm just going to pick up the tiniest touch of, nope, that's too much. Light buttermilk. See, and I can get that coloring in and the direction much better than straight down. Straight doesn't make sense there. Straight doesn't make sense here. It's got to come toward the base of that leaf. Okay, and then anything off the edge, you just want it to be a little bit on the darker side. So a little more plantation pine. And if I needed to add in just a touch of Payne's Gray, I could. Okay. But on my finished one, what I really love is the, I can see more of that turquoise. So I am going to pull in a little bit more of that peacock teal. Like on here. A mezzaluna brush would be perfect. I didn't use it on mine, but if you wanted to brighten something up with the mezzaluna brush, which is perfect for that, or whatever your favorite dry brush is, you know, to pull on a little bit brighter highlight. Again, use your finger to kind of rub it out. Okay, and I don't think I'm going to go through the other two. They're painted exactly the same way. All right, so as you're doing them, however, I will share and show you. Share and show with you When you're doing them, you want to make sure that you know where your vein, your center vein's coming from. So it's helpful to kind of put that in, okay? So that you know the top of the leaf is here, the base is down here, the top of the leaf is here, the base is here, so that you're pulling those in the direction. But you saw how I did there, how easy it is to fix if you don't. And then the only other thing I added, once you get those done, is shading in between these two leaves. Okay, so see here, I added some Payne's Gray shading right between those two leaves so that they stand out, and then also where it meets the stem. Okay, now I didn't do a lot of shading, funny enough, which I normally do. If this is too light, meaning you have too much white in your background, pop in a little bit of asphaltum and Payne's Gray between those. My original is fine. The one I'm doing right now is fine. See, with that color? I didn't come in and add a lot of shading on the flowers or by the flowers, but if you feel like you need to, by all means come in with a little bit of asphaltum. But again, I didn't do drop shadows on this one. I didn't do a lot of shading. However, I did up here on my finished one, and I see here on this one I need to. So I want to show that to you. With my angle brush and a little bit of asphaltum, I want to separate that pod just a little bit from that background. Okay? Because we have that, see how that right there just separated that? And the asphaltum's going to be less harsh than even the Payne's Gray, which is my go-to shading color. Love it. But to keep that wood look, that asphaltum's going to be perfect. All right, and then I do need to shade a little bit more right there to separate those two. Okay, and then again, that asphaltum. If you want to add a little tiny touch under those so that they stand out. But I felt like my flowers on my finished one and even on this one didn't need a lot of shading. But that doesn't mean that yours doesn't. If you feel like it needs to be separated a little bit of asphaltum. All right. So let's zoom out just a little. And you can see the, and I'm not too bothered with this. I'll be honest, I love my original one better. I feel like my veins on my original are a little bit on the lighter side. And so I probably will come back in and brighten those up. But it's similar, you know. And this one, I used the Mezzaluna brush to give you, if you wanted to add a little dry brush look, you certainly could. I did not do that on my finish. They're very smooth, even though there's a lot of brush strokes to it. Okay? So, hopefully, you guys will have some fun painting that this week. Get those other two leaves painted exactly the same way with the directions that I gave for this one. And again, if you have any questions at all, you know exactly where to find me, right? Right here. But again, I don't know. I love this one. I hope you guys do too. And the